Hey everyone, Dave, Dr. Shockbecker here, and thought I would go over another portion of my collection. Uh, Three box sets that I have, and they're three, well, very important box sets, but for a specific reason. When I was a very young film fan, and I'm talking back in, I'm going to say the very early 80s, so I was still in grade school at the time. There were three directors or three filmmakers who really influenced me. Not so much influenced me, but influenced my love of movies, I guess is the best way to put it. And I sort of call them my triumvirate. And it's an unusual one, but they were the ones who really sort of sparked my love of movies. And I have box sets of each of their films. First one I'm going to talk about, filmmaker or director, takes me back to June of 1981. It was my brother's 10th birthday. And for his birthday, it was late in the month, we were going to the movies. And we wanted to see Dragon Slayer. That was a movie we wanted to see. My father had us in the car. It was myself. I was sitting in the front seat with him, and then about my brother and 3 or 4 of our friends in the back. We pulled up to the theater. It was at the King of Prussia Mall, and it was a 2-screen theater. We pull up to the theater, and I hear my father. He looks up at the marquee, and I hear him sort of mutter an expletive under his breath. Well, I looked up at the marquee, and Dragon Slayer was not up there. He had taken us to the wrong theater. So I had suggested to my friends, why don't we just go see the movie that was playing? Because I had seen a commercial, a 15-second. They used to do 15-second commercials back then. You'd have 30-second and 15 seconds just to give you a taste of the movie. And I had seen a 15-second commercial, and it looked kind of maybe a good movie, something exciting. And my father was all for that idea. He wanted us out of his car as quickly as he could. I think we were getting under his skin. There were some objections, including my brother. We all wanted to see Dragon Slayer, but we weren't going to make it in time to the correct theater. So my father was just like, you're going to go see this movie. So we all got out. We went into the theater, not sure what to expect. And then the movie started. The opening sequence was mesmerizing, and it was something I just couldn't take my eyes off of. It was Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the moment that plane flies off into the distance, that was the moment I fell in love with movies. It was that opening sequence of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'd always enjoyed movies before that. I always liked them. Star Wars, obviously, Empire Strikes Back, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'd seen all them in the theater, and I really liked them. And I was really into them. But it was that opening sequence that sparked my love of movies and wanted me to learn more about movies, about the making of them, and the people behind the camera. So the first of the 3 filmmakers is, of course, Steven Spielberg. And I have this box set. Now, this does not have Raiders of the Lost Ark in it. I do have a box set of all of the Indiana Jones movies. It does include Raiders of the Lost Ark on Blu-ray. We'll take this out real quick here. Bear with me. This has Duel, which the first time I saw Duel was over at it was in the 80s, and it was at my grandparents' house. They had a back deck that they had converted into another room on the house, and they had a TV out there. I remember sitting out there. It was always a little more chilly than the rest of the house, but I didn't care because I just watched Duel, and I was so into it. I just watched it from start to finish and absolutely loved it. Sugarland Express, I'm not real familiar with, I got to be honest. Jaws, of course, is a masterpiece. 1941, I talked about in my video about the 70s, in my 70s collection. I always thought this movie was funny. Slim Pickens is hilarious in it. He has an hilarious cameo. John Belushi is very funny. Warren Oates is funny in this. It's loud and it is obnoxious, but it's just great. And it's got Mickey Rourke in it, too. Only one line in the movie. He yells torpedo at one point. But it's kind of interesting to see Mickey Rourke early on in his career. E.T., I do really love E.T. I do. It's not one of my favorite Spielberg movies. Nowadays it's not, but it is so well made, and it is a great film. Always. Yeah, I did see that on cable, I think. It's a strange kind of collection they have here. Jurassic Park, great. Lost World, not as great as Jurassic Park, but has its moments, I think. And I love this quote, "When I grow up, I still want to be a director. And I dream for a living." So Spielberg was the first of those directors who influenced me. It was also in 1981, and actually I think it might have even been a little bit before we saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, that my father took my brother and I to see a movie. It was a rated R comedy. Now, we had seen another rated R comedy in the theater in 1980. It was Stir Crazy with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. Had some language. I think it had brief nudity in it. But, we handled it okay. We were very young. I think in 1980 I was 10. My brother was 8. But my father took us to see it. We handled it okay. Well, based on another 15-second commercial, this one showing Moses coming down from the mountain carrying 3 stones, dropping one and breaking it. And, saying the Lord Jehovah has given unto you these 15, one of the tablets falls and breaks, holds up the other 2, 10 commandments for all to obey. That was the 15-second commercial. We cracked up. I thought it was funny. My father was cracking up. He decided to take us to see it. My mother objected. She said it is an R-rated movie. My father's like, oh, it's a comedy. It'll be okay. I took him to see Stir Crazy. It was no problem. The movie was History of the World, Part 1. Not a movie that an 11 and a 9-year-old should have been there to see. Even in the opening scene with, the dawn of man and cavemen get up and are masturbating, and we didn't know what they were doing. We asked my father. When we came home, my father went to my mother. He walked in the door and goes, okay, I'm only going to say this once. I should not have taken them to see that movie. But after then, the next week, or a couple weeks later, whatever it was, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, then I started to want to get to know a little bit about history of the world. And a friend of mine, whose father had also, no, this was later, when it played on cable. When we got cable in 82 and History of the World was playing on cable, he saw it and loved it. He ended up buying a coffee table book with images from the movie and lines from the movie in it. And I loved that book. I never did get a copy of it. I really wanted to. But then I started to delve into the career of my second filmmaker, director. Sorry, put my finger there in front. And that is Mel Brooks. And I have this Mel Brooks collection. You can pick this up fairly cheap now. I don't think the box like this. I think it's packaged differently. But you can pick up the Mel Brooks collection, I think, for almost $20 now, all of these films. And it's just great. It comes with this this awesome book, and it's got, the king on the front from History of the World Part 1 with the line, "It's good to be the king." And then the movies themselves. It does not have the producers because that was put out, that was not, I guess, the producers was by a different company. And it does not have Life Stinks or Dracula Dead and Loving It, which I don't care about, to be honest with you. I didn't see Dracula Dead and Loving It, and I did not like Life Stinks. I love the producers. I do have it on Blu-ray, but it's not part of this collection. It starts with the 12 Chairs. This is one, if you have not seen the 12 Chairs, you have to see the 12 Chairs. It's from 1970. It's Mel Brooks' second movie. It's Ron Moody, Frank Langella, Dom DeLuise, set in Russia right after the revolution. It is so funny. I think it's hilarious. Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. I got the video for Blazing Saddles for Christmas one year. I want to say when I was a sophomore in high school. And we watched that on Christmas Day when my grandparents were visiting. And my father, my grandfather, and myself and my brother, we just could not stop laughing. It was great. And I asked for Young Frankenstein that same year, but they weren't able to get it. I saw that a few years later and loved that just as much. You know, that might even... it's between these two as to what is Mel Brooks's masterpiece, in my opinion. Silent movie, High Anxiety. I bought High Anxiety on video, and I played that video every week. I love High Anxiety, and we'll get to that a little bit more in a minute. But yeah, I really do. I really enjoyed High Anxiety. I played that video, and I have the video. I still have the video. It'll probably surface when I do a... I sort of look at all of the VHS tapes that I still own, some of which are going back to, you know, almost, 27, 28 years old now, or 37 or 38 years old now. And High Anxiety is one of them. I still have my original videotape of that. History of the World, Part 1. There's Dom DeLuise as the Emperor. To Be or Not to Be, I remember seeing in the theater. I know Mel Brooks did not direct it, but it's still very much a Mel Brooks movie with a great performance by Mel Brooks and some great lines in it as well. And then we have Spaceballs, which I saw twice in 1 week in the theater. It's funny. I think it's Mel Brooks's last sort of hurrah. Robin Hood Men in Tights was a little more hit and miss for me, but still had some moments. You know, I liked it better when I first rented it. When it first came out on video and I rented it, I actually stopped the video and took it back. I was kind of depressed because I just wasn't digging it. But then when I got this set, I watched it in its entirety, and it's not nearly as bad as I remember back then, and it does have some moments, but it's still... You could see Mel Brooks was sort of fading, I guess, cinematically at that point. He had a revival on Broadway, obviously, in a big way. But it's still not a bad movie. It really isn't. All right. Well, that brings me to the third filmmaker, and I mentioned High Anxiety. High Anxiety is a spoof of Alfred Hitchcock movies. And I had known who Alfred Hitchcock was prior to even becoming the full-fledged film fan I was in 1980. I'm pretty sure I had seen Psycho on TV at one point. And The Birds I had seen, I'm sure, by this point. But it was High Anxiety that sort of introduced me to other Hitchcock movies. And I went to Kmart one day, and this is after, you know, we have our VCR at this point, and they had a bargain bin of videos. And I'm talking maybe 1984, something like that. And these videos were only $3, $4. And this is in the day where you were spending, we were spending $70, $80 for videotapes, brand new. But these were bargain. I guess they were obviously public domain, maybe a little more than 4 or 5, but they weren't much more. And they were The Man Who Knew Too Much, the 30s version of The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Sabotage, 2 of Hitchcock's earliest films. And I watched the hell out of those videos, especially The Man Who Knew Too Much. I loved that movie. And Sabotage was great as well. There was just something about him learning his craft in these films, and you could see him trying different things. It was so much fun, both of them. I enjoyed them immensely. And so obviously, my third director, my third filmmaker is Alfred Hitchcock. And he was the one who sort of opened up a whole new door of movies for me, like older films. And from Hitchcock, I got into a few other directors of the past, like Howard Hawks and so forth. But it was Hitchcock, and I had a Hitchcock book at one point that listed all of his movies, and I was highlighting them. Each time I saw a new one, I would highlight it in this book. I got to find that book. I know I still have it. The cover fell off of it, but I still have the book. I saw it recently, and I don't know where it got to. But this is a great collection. I mean, Saboteur is where it starts. Shadow of a Doubt, I think, was one of Hitchcock's favorites, if not his favorite of all of his movies, and rightly so. It's a great one. Rope, where he experimented with long takes. I really enjoy that film. Rear Window is one of my top 5 Hitchcock movies. I saw it on cable back in the day. I recorded it. I even remember showing my parents, and I remember my mother was so on the edge of her seat at one point. She's like, tell me right now if he dies, because if he does, you turn this off right now. Like, she was really getting into it. The suspense was really getting to her, which is exactly what Hitchcock was shooting for. The Trouble with Harry, a funny movie. The Man Who Knew Too Much, the remake of the 30s version. And this one's very good. I mean, this one, it's probably a better film than the 30s version, but I just love the black and white with Peter Lorre. I just love that movie. Vertigo, my favorite Hitchcock film, and it's a very personal film for him. Scotty, played by James Stewart, is basically Hitchcock. He's trying to make over Kim Novak into his perfect woman, late in the film, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's definitely worth the watch. North by Northwest, so entertaining. Psycho, horror classic, one of the most famous scenes in a horror movie ever. Takes place in the shower. The Birds, another really great movie. Marnie, I haven't seen often, but I remember when I watched it, I thought it was great. I thought it was a great film. I just haven't seen it as much as I've seen other Hitchcock films. And that's the way it is for his later ones. I will now confess to have never seen Torn Curtain. And this is one that, it's been kind of hanging over me. I have to see that one. Topaz was good. I didn't think it was great, but it was good. Frenzy was great. Frenzy was an awesome Hitchcock film. It really was. And Family Plot, his last movie, I really enjoyed also. Good cast. It was William Devane, Karen Black. I know Bruce Dern is in this, and Barbara Harris. Great cast, and just a great movie. And with these filmmakers, I'm sorry, I keep putting my finger in front of the camera there. It's when I switch back and forth. I also bought books early on that talked about each one of them. And I'll just show you those real quick. Well, you're going to have to bear with me for a second here. I didn't have them at the ready. Yes, this is very poor. And I should have had these at the ready. So, pardon me. I had them on the chair over here. Method and Madness, about Mel Brooks. I bought this in Ocean City at a bookstore, I want to say 1983. It was printed initially in the 70s and then reprinted in 81 because I think it has as an epilogue History of the World. It had stopped initially at High Anxiety, but it did have History of the World. So this is an older one. I remember reading this one, and it gets behind the scenes, even with his television work for Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows, the 2,000-year-old man, and then it gets into all of his movies. I loved how it talked about the deleted scenes in Blazing Saddles. I didn't know anything about this. This is in the days, obviously, before the internet, so it was kind of cool to find out about those. Hitchcock Truffaut. This is a book I still return to often. It's Truffaut sat down with Hitchcock and interviewed him about every movie he made, including the Back to the Silent Days. Ooh, Lifeboat is so good. That's another in my top 5 Hitchcock movies. And it's very informative. If you are a fledgling filmmaker, this should be like a Bible for you because Hitchcock goes into so much and he talks frankly about these films. I mean, he was movies that are revered that Truffaut absolutely loved. Hitchcock himself would come out and say, yeah, it really wasn't that good because of this, because of that. I made mistakes here. I made mistakes there. But it's such a good book. It really is. I know I have a Spielberg book somewhere, but it's more recent. This is one that I bought, again, back in the day, and there's Hitchcock again, directing Torn Curtain. But it's also got Spielberg in it, and its directors, the all-time greats. I think this is another one I used to take to school with me for for reading. It just goes over all the filmmakers, and I got to know all of them, you know, and read about their movies, and I really wanted to see the films that were pictured here. As you could see, this is an old book because, I mean, Fred Zinnemann was still alive. Billy Wilder was still alive at this point. Orson Welles was still alive when this was printed. So, Fellini, obviously, Buñuel, Godard. Well, Godard is, you know. So this is just great because it introduced me to foreign films. This book, and just some great filmmakers. Even David Lean was still around at this point when this book was printed. All right, so that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like it if you did, and subscribe to my channel. And I will be back with more from my collection at some point. I'll do more poster videos and just whatever else I happen to find laying around that I think is interesting. All right, I will talk to y'all later.